In an ideal world, bolts would turn almost effortlessly. In and out. In and out. Until we torque them up to just the required amount with a torque wrench. Unfortunately though, this is not an ideal world, and bolts will quite often end up looking like that. And when you come to undo them, you stick your Allen key in and the bolt head just rounds straight out. In this case, we actually have a plan B because there's a flat-headed screwdriver fitting, but unfortunately, the bolts are in too tight and that just rounds out as well. So, how are we going to remove our stuck and rounded bolts? We need a two-pronged attack. Firstly, we need to come up with some kind of hack to deal with the fact that our tool no longer fits in the head of our bolt. And then we also need some way of loosening the threads of the bolt, because more often than not, the reason you'd have stripped it in the first place was actually because it's too stiff or too seized just to undo. Let's deal with the tool side of things, shall we? We've got to try this hack first from GCM viewer Ruben Tiao, who suggested that you can put a rubber band over the head of the bolt, and then you put the tool through the rubber band, and the rubber increases the friction on the tool and hopefully fills in the gaps, and therefore you can undo your bolt. Unfortunately, in this instance, with my super seized up cleat bolts and incredibly rounded bolt heads, it's not actually working. But I would definitely suggest that you give this one a try, because I've heard from other sources as well that it does work. Next up, we're going to try a Torx key. Now this is a little bit random, I know, but we've had loads of you suggesting it, and I've also heard really good things about it. Basically, a Torx key is a 6-pointed star as opposed to a hexagon. And so the slightly different shape can mean that you get a little bit more purchase with the bolt. However, you are going to need to increase the size of the Torx key relative to the Allen key. So in this case, we've got a 3mm Allen bolt, a T15 that would correspond to it size-wise. So you have to use a slightly bigger size, the T20, and then obviously it doesn't fit, so you will need to whack it in there with a hammer. Then it should grip the bolt and you hopefully be able to turn it. Clearly there is quite a big risk here, particularly damaging your Torx key, although I've never actually done it in the couple of times that I've tried this hack before and all the people I've spoken to, but the risk is there. So you need to weigh up the cost of potentially trashing your Torx key with the benefit of removing said bolt. Now before we take things up a notch and involve power tools, we need to go back to actually trying to loosen the threads of the bolt. If you take a trip to your local tool store, you will see that seized bolts are a universal problem, and therefore there are a whole raft of potential solutions out there. What we want to look for to begin with though is penetrating oil. Now that takes many different forms, and I have no idea honestly which works the best, but the principle tends to be the same. You spray it on and then you leave it, and then you spray some more on and you leave it, potentially overnight. Hopefully over time the penetrating oil will seep into the threads of the bolt and free things up. You can also get products that promise even more, like shock and unlock spray, whereby you actually have a freezing agent added to the penetrating oil, and that then hopefully contracts the metal and then loosens it up. Now hopefully that combination of penetrating oil and then hack / bodging with a tool will get your seized and stripped bolt out. However, if it doesn't, we're still not out of options. We need to involve a drill. Although this is the point at which I then take my bike or shoe down to my local bike shop, although I can admittedly now see their hearts visibly sinking when I walk through the door. But then, if you want to do it yourself, what you're going to need to do is secure the part very tightly in a vise and then drill very carefully with a drill bit that's the same size as the shaft of the bolt down through the head of the bolt, at which point whatever the part it's securing will come loose. But then if you want to reuse the part, you're going to need to keep drilling down through the threads until the bolt is clean gone, and then re-tap the threads. It's not an impossible task, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a little bit tricky and it is quite time consuming. You'll notice that I still have a cleat firmly, unfortunately, attached to the bottom of my shoe that I'm desperate to reuse. So there is one last option available in this specific instance that I have resorted to in the past. Because the cleat is plastic, you can take a hacksaw, cut through it, and then actually pull the cleat apart, and that leaves little bolts dangling around underneath your carbon sole. I then took a file and filed flat edges onto my bolt heads so I could get extra purchase with a set of mole grips, and then got them right off. That too was a time-consuming job, but there we go. That's the price you pay for not adequately preparing the threads of your bolt before putting them in the first place. You've got three options at your disposal: grease, thread lock, and anti-seize. Now, of the three, grease is probably the one you're most likely to have at home, and it is perfectly adequate for most situations. If you want a bit more information on these three, and indeed how to use them though, we've got a full video on that subject. It's pretty useful. Click just down there to watch that one. Do also make sure that you subscribe to GCN. It's very simple and it's free. Just click on the globe. And then one last video to suggest for you, seeing as I've spent the morning unsuccessfully trying to remove a cleat. Make sure you get it right in the first place. That is how you fit cleats to your shoes.